Warning, this episode may contain disturbing content, soothing narration, and mild existential dread. Basically, murder ASMR for stressed professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hell, it might be necessary.
Almost doesn't matter unless you're playing with horseshoes or hand grenades, and the latter is not recommended. Because history isn't written in near misses or hypotheticals. It's written by what happened, what stuck, what couldn't be undone. But every so often there's a case that lives entirely in the margin, a case that sits on the edge of something much larger, a case where the distance between obscurity and consequence is measured in a single decision. Today's story is one of those cases. It begins with a fire, not a sophisticated one, not a symbolic one, just a spark lit by a known criminal with a very bad idea and a worse understanding of how evidence actually disappears. That fire drew attention, federal attention, and for a brief moment it threatened to expose something far bigger than the man who had lit the match. What nearly unraveled wasn't a single crime or even a single theft, but a supporting structure, a pipeline, a network that for years quietly moved weapons into the hands of an organization variously classified by governments around the world as terrorist, criminal, paramilitary, or insurgent, depending on the country and the moment in history. The Irish Republican Army. The man at the center of this case wasn't a leader, he wasn't ideological, he wasn't even particularly important until suddenly he was. He didn't organize the system, he didn't control it, but he sat in the exact wrong place at exactly the wrong time, holding information that could have illuminated how that system functioned, who supplied it, who moved the weapons, and how close the American criminal world had come to international conflict. And it all hinged on one question. Would he talk? He didn't. And because he didn't, this case became something else entirely. Not a breakthrough, not a reckoning, but a reminder of how fragile and how resilient these networks can be. This is a story about silence, about proximity, about how close history sometimes comes to changing and how easily it slips back into place. This is The Weakest Link, the fire that threatened the IRA. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark, sooty landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer, former firefighter, and an almost lottery winner, which we'll learn today counts for nothing.
And I'm completely unprepared as per my contractual agreement.
Thank you for listening. We are genuinely glad you're here, and before you go, we desperately need your help. It will cost you absolutely nothing. Wherever you're listening, please leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, or an episode comment, whatever your platform allows. This is how we survive the algorithmic wasteland and find our people. In December, nearly 5,000 of you listened to this show, which is incredible. But at the time of this recording, we have 63 5-star ratings on Spotify and 60 on Apple Podcasts, which means mathematically about 4,800 of you are leaving us hanging. Please help us out by clicking those 5 stars. It is really important. To the 3 people who did leave Spotify ratings this week, we are eternally grateful. I cannot see who you are, but Steve has been instructed to ensure that your snacks are plentiful. And thank you to those who left episode comments. Victor and BMCLETHERO.
LMNOPEIEIO.
Is that like BM Clet Hero? Or BMC Let Hero? I'm not sure how I'm supposed to break that apart.
The Boomba Clot Hero.
But you guys left comments on Podbean, and we are especially grateful. And over on Spotify, deep breath, what I believe is an Icelandic name that I will try not to butcher. Heithis Northfjord Gunnarsdóttir. Thank you for your comment, and I hope I said that right. I asked AI for help, so if I was wrong, I will beat my robot senseless. And also thank you to Heidi, who also left us a Spotify comment. We appreciate you all from the bottom of our snack stash.
I don't think you know where that is.
In the pantry.
In the pantry.
If you'd like to support the show financially and help us afford absurdly expensive court records, you can do that over on Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. And this week, we are welcoming our newest indoctrinated member, Melanie Curtis. Thank you so much for your support. Stickers will go out as soon as I figure out where I accidentally hid the stamps from myself.
They're on the side of the refrigerator.
Thank you. If financial support isn't in the cards, no worries. The show will always be free with ads, and you can still help us grow by following us on social media and liking, commenting, sharing, or saving our content. That tells the algorithm we're interesting, and it helps us guilt trip even more of you into leaving a rating. You can also help support the show by plastering our logo on your body by checking out our spread shop, link in the show notes, and that way you can advertise your excellent taste in podcasts to everyone you see. And finally, please send us your fire stories, case suggestions, feedback, and winning lottery numbers to crimetoburn@gmail.com. This is episode 95. We are creeping toward episode 100, which means we put thousands of hours into this show. And all we ask in return is 5 stars and a light ego tickle over on social media. Please and thank you. When we first relaunched this show, an author named Wayne M. Miller reached out to me. Wayne is the author of Burn, Boston, Burn, and the book that this week's story comes from, Bang, Boom, Burn, which suggests Wayne enjoys alliteration almost as much as I do. Now, Wayne spent more than 25 years as a special agent with the ATF, and Bang, Boom, Burn is a collection of cases that he worked over the course of that career. I will be linking his books in the show notes. Now, Wayne currently doesn't know that I'm covering this case this week, but I am going to let him know, and my plan is to cover several of the cases from his books over the next few months, and if he's interested, invite him to join us on the show. So if you'd like to help us lure a former ATF agent onto the podcast, feel free to leave us lots of episode comments about how great this episode was. No pressure. This episode covers one case from a book that contains 21. And while I'll be sprinkling in a few more over the coming months alongside the other cases on our list, you should absolutely go and check out Wayne's book if this story grabs you. Just to be clear, the views expressed in this episode are mine and mine alone. They don't represent the ATF or any government agency, and this discussion is based on publicly available records and published accounts, most specifically from Wayne Miller's account from the book Bang, Boom, Burn. It was April 7th, 1980, when the Walpole Fire Department in Massachusetts was dispatched to a reported garage fire at a private residence. When firefighters arrived, they found smoke pushing out around the edges of a closed garage door. They forced entry and were met by heavy smoke conditions inside the garage. Beneath a roll of discarded carpet, they located the source: a trash can still smoldering. Inside the trash can were 17 rifles, which was unusual. Now, given the heavy smoke conditions, firefighters proceeded into the house to check for any occupants who might have been overcome by the smoke. What they found inside immediately escalated the situation from odd to deeply concerning, because there were more guns. A lot more guns. 46 M16A1 rifles stored throughout the home, alongside a hoard of property that would later be confirmed stolen. Investigators would eventually value that stolen property at more than $1 million in 1980, which would be roughly $4 million today. Now, according to at least one online source, firefighters and police initially theorized that the fire had been intentionally set in an attempt to destroy these weapons, which is an interesting approach to weapons destruction. Because here's the thing, if a firearm reaches around 500 degrees Fahrenheit, it might become unsafe to use, springs can lose their temper, tolerances can change, but the weapon is not going to be destroyed. To render a gun unusable beyond repair, you're looking at temperatures closer to 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, but to actually melt steel, which I assume would be the goal if you're trying to erase evidence from a federal armory theft that we're about to talk about, you would need somewhere between 2500 and 2800 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, could a house fire reach 1100 degrees? Yes. Could it reach over 2000 degrees, especially with the use of accelerants? Also yes. But a fire hot enough and sustained enough to truly destroy dozens of rifles would not potentially stop at a trash can. It would have consumed the garage, the house, and quite likely the $1 million worth of stolen property that was stored inside. Which raises an obvious question. Who decides, let's start a small controlled garage fire to destroy military weapons, and expects the plan to work? We also know that the homeowner was present when the fire started, because when the fire department arrived, a neighbor showed up and told them that she had noticed the smoke coming from the garage while out walking and went to knock on the door to warn the homeowner. And he had answered, told her yes, he was aware of the fire and that he had already taken care of it, which she reasonably assumed meant he'd called the fire department. But he hadn't. After she left, the homeowner did too. So was this fire intentional or accidental? I can't say for certain, but the fact that the fire was confined to a trash can covered by a rug makes this accidental explanation a little harder to accept. Now, that house belonged to a man named Charles Ambrose Galant. An interesting man, and we're going to get to him in a moment. But first, we need to talk about his guns. Because owning guns isn't illegal. Owning 46 fully automatic M16A1 rifles stolen from the Danvers National Guard Armory in 1976?
That's illegal.
That's a very different story. The Danvers National Guard Armory, located in Danvers, Massachusetts, was hit in August of 1976. Sometime over a weekend, a group of men cut through the chain link fence surrounding the armory, snipped the phone lines to prevent any alarm signal from going out, and then picked a lock to gain access to the building. But getting into the building was only the first step. The weapons were stored inside a reinforced concrete vault with a steel door secured by a combination lock. And apparently these men did not have access to an experienced safecracker. There was no slick code cracking or no cinematic finesse. Instead, they brought pickaxes. They spent more than an hour hacking their way through the steel vault door, which by all accounts was thirsty work, because while they were there, they also broke into the Coke machine, which is my favorite detail.
Sometimes you just need a sody pop.
Once the vault was breached, an unmarked van reportedly pulled around to the back of a neighboring Best Western hotel, right where the fence had been cut, and the men loaded the weapons into the van and disappeared. When an employee arrived for work at the armory Monday morning, the scope of the theft became clear. Gone were 92 M16 rifles, 7 M60 belt-fed machine guns, 1 .45 caliber pistol, 2 grenade launchers, multiple flak jackets, infrared binoculars, and a red-eye missile launcher.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
A haul so large and so militarily specific that it immediately raised a far more troubling question. Who are these weapons really for? Now, obviously, this would have been concerning, but according to the Boston Globe, everything was fine, because the next day the headline read, 100 useless guns stolen in Danvers. According to the article, the firing pins for the weapons were not stored with the guns themselves, but kept separately at the Danvers police station.
Wait a minute.
I was waiting for that to hit.
I'm going to need you to say all that again.
The headline read, 100 useless guns stolen in Danvers. According to the article, the firing pins for the weapons were not stored with the guns themselves, but kept separately at the Danvers police station.
That's definitely what I heard you say before. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Which makes this whole thing feel strange. Because that's a lot of work, cutting fences, snipping phone lines, hacking through a reinforced steel vault door with pickaxes to steal an arsenal of allegedly useless weapons. But were they really useless?
There's no way they pulled the firing pins out of all these things and kept them somewhere. This is someone's imaginary tale of ridiculousness.
Well, 2 years later, about half of the stolen guns surfaced in the hands of British authorities, having been recovered from members of the Irish Republican Army, or the IRA.
Did you steal this episode from Sons of Anarchy or something?
I did not. And that's where this case stops being local. And I'll be honest, before this case, my grasp on the IRA was surface level at best. So if you're in the same boat, let's do a very quick history lesson. In 1921, the Anglo-Irish Treaty established the Irish Free State, granting most of Ireland independence from Britain. But the treaty also partitioned the island, leaving the 6 northern counties, what we now know as Northern Ireland, under British control. Before that treaty, all of Ireland had been part of the United Kingdom. Those northern counties weren't arbitrary. They were heavily industrialized and economically valuable, and over time, the British government had encouraged settlement there by people loyal to the crown, primarily Protestants. Ireland, meanwhile, was a colonized country. Political power and land ownership were concentrated among the Protestants, British-aligned elites, while the majority Catholic population began to experience systemic oppression, culturally, politically, and economically. So while the treaty delivered independence for much of Ireland, it did so at a cost: partition. Britain retained control of Northern Ireland, a decision that satisfied the Crown and its loyalist settlers, but infuriated Irish Republicans who had fought for a fully independent, unified Ireland. And that fracture is what gave rise to the IRA. The Irish Republican Army was a paramilitary organization fighting to end British rule in Northern Ireland and achieve a united, independent Ireland through armed struggle, bombings, and assassinations. The conflict gained real momentum in the 1960s and 1970s as the conditions in Northern Ireland became increasingly discriminatory against Catholics. Housing, education, employment, and police recruitment were all controlled by state institutions that overwhelmingly favored Protestants loyal to the British Crown. As Irish civil rights movements gained traction, tensions escalated into open clashes. The British Army was deployed to restore order, but many Catholics came to see the military not as peacekeepers but as a repressive force protecting loyalist interests. The violence intensified. And out of that escalation emerged a new faction, the Provisional IRA, often referred to as the Provosts. They launched an insurgency against British forces, an effort that was largely suppressed, prompting a shift in tactics toward attacks on both military and civilian targets. To the IRA, the British government and military represented an occupying force using political power to oppress the Irish Catholic population. To those loyal to the Crown, the IRA's campaign was terrorism. Freedom fighters or terrorists, I'll leave that judgment up to you. But that's how the IRA came to exist in the briefest possible overview. And yes, the reality is far more complex, but what matters here is this: insurgencies require firepower. And that firepower was tightly controlled by the British government. So if you can't walk into a sporting goods store and arm a militant organization, you turn to the black market. Now, according to an investigative report by the Boston Globe, in 1977, the year after the Danvers armory heist, representatives from the IRA met in Chicago with the group that was responsible for the robbery in order to purchase weapons. At least one shipment of those weapons was intercepted by authorities, but not all of it. By that point, the IRA had already obtained some of the M16 rifles stolen from Danvers, and in 1978, it became clear they also had possession of the Danvers M60 machine guns. One of those M60s surfaced during a skirmish between the IRA and British soldiers on patrol. And the following year, the IRA allegedly used one of the M60s to shoot down a British Army helicopter. But no one had been able to trace how the Danvers weapons made it into IRA hands. It was a question everyone wanted answered, and no one could. Until 1980. That's when the Walpole Fire Department responded to a garage fire and discovered a smoldering trash can filled with military-grade rifles, and dozens more weapons stored throughout the home. Now, the house belonged to Charles Ambrose Galant. And when investigators ran the serial numbers, the answer finally surfaced, because the guns were among those stolen from the Danvers Armory 4 years earlier. Now, it's important to be clear about this. There is no evidence that Galant was involved in the Danvers Armory heist itself. None. Zero. But he was in possession of the stolen weapons, and that mattered because possession meant proximity. And proximity meant that Galant could be the missing link, the person who could explain how military weapons stolen in Massachusetts ended up on the front lines of the IRA's campaign. He may not have planned the theft, he may not have moved the guns overseas himself, but he might have been close enough to know how it happened. The first problem was that police had to find him. Charles Ambrose Galant was a career criminal. According to Wayne Miller's account, he wasn't a mastermind, just a classic breaking and entering guy. He cased houses, waited until no one was home, showed up with suitcases, and left with jewelry, collectibles, and guns when he could find them. He was clean, quiet, and completely non-violent. But after his neighbor knocked on the door to warn him that his garage was on fire, a revelation that did not appear to surprise him, Galant simply vanished. As you might imagine, finding 46 stolen military rifles in a home that had just experienced a suspicious fire tends to pique federal interest, especially when the other half of those stolen guns had already surfaced in IRA hands. So the house quickly filled with federal agents. As they laid the M16A1 rifles out in the yard to photograph and tag them, looky-loos were inevitable. Flashing lights draw attention. But one car stood out. The street wasn't near a main road, and it was typically traveled only by locals that lived in the neighborhood. And yet, there sat a shiny, high-end, brand-new Cadillac, a very expensive car that didn't quite belong in the neighborhood. So agents approached and asked the men inside a simple question. Did they know the homeowner Charles Galant? And they said no. They claimed they were just passing by and slowed down by curiosity and flashing lights. And that explanation might have worked if investigators hadn't found a photograph inside the house. A photograph of Charles Galant standing between the two very men that had been sitting in the Cadillac. But the photograph didn't surface until after the men in the shiny Cadillac had already lied to investigators and driven off. But fortunately, at this point, agents had their names. The two men were brothers, both named McLaughlin. Now, investigators were understandably eager to speak with them again, and to find out whether either brother could help them locate Charles Galant. Acting on information about where one of the brothers, McLaughlin, had been staying, investigators went to a residence where both a McLaughlin brother and Galant were believed to have been living, at least temporarily. But neither man was there at the time, but someone else was. And that individual, bafflingly, gave federal agents permission to look around the residence. Inside, they located multiple firearms, which is a problem given that the man present was a convicted felon and legally prohibited from possessing guns. And according to him, at least one of those weapons belonged to one of the McLaughlin brothers, who was also a felon and prohibited from being allowed to own guns. And that was enough. Agents obtained a warrant for McLaughlin's arrest, and at this time he was out of the country, but his very cooperative felon acquaintance had helpfully told agents when he was due to return, so federal agents waited, and when he disembarked at Boston Logan International Airport, he was met with a team of federal agents that took him into custody. But despite their efforts, he provided zero information about Galant's whereabouts. But investigators weren't out of ideas yet, because Galant was married, sort of. According to Wayne Miller's account, Galant had what he described as a common-law wife, which he had reportedly won in a game of cards. And I'll be honest, I am deeply irked that the book does not elaborate on this, because some tangents are worth taking. But police were able to locate Galant's wife, who very helpfully directed them straight to her attorney. But she lived in Hyde Park, and investigators knew that meant there was at least a chance that Galant might surface in this area, so they watched her. For a while. Nothing. It wasn't the poker chip wife that led to Galant's arrest. It was one of his more reliable vices. Galant, it turned out, enjoyed his libations generously. According to Wayne Miller, there happened to be a liquor store near Galant's wife's residence, whose clerk actually owed Miller a favor. Years earlier, that clerk had been the victim of a gun theft, and Miller had helped recover and return those stolen guns. Now Miller decided it was time to call that favor in. He went to the store, showed the clerk a photograph of Galant, and asked him if he'd seen him recently. The clerk said no, but Miller left his card and walked out empty-handed. And a few days later, the phone rang. The clerk reported that Galant, or someone closely matching his description, had been in the store, and better yet, the clerk had noticed the man's vehicle and recorded the description and license plate number. There was just one problem. The car was stolen. Still, investigators put the vehicle information out and waited, hoping that someone would spot it soon. And then on June 2nd in Grafton, Connecticut, a man was arrested for driving while intoxicated. As the patrol officer placed him in the cruiser, the man volunteered an interesting bit of information. He told the officer that if he knew who he'd just arrested, he would be calling the FBI. Ballsy.
You dumbass, I'm a bigger criminal than you imagine, man. You better get some reinforcements down there.
The officer, however, did not know who he was because the man was only carrying fake identification and refused to give his real name. So they did what officers do and they ran the tags. And the tags came back as a match for the stolen vehicle that the ATF had been searching for, thanks to that license plate number provided by one very observant liquor store clerk. It turned out that Charles Ambrose Galant had just been arrested for drunk driving. That's what took him down. And that's how the ATF finally got their hands on him. Now, Galant was given the opportunity to talk to the ATF to tell them who he was holding the guns for, but he refused. He told agents that he couldn't say, and he expressed concern that there might already be a hit out on him. In fact, he actually asked Wayne Miller, the ATF agent, to stay with him in jail because he feared for his life. Now, maybe I've watched too many movies, but when someone is afraid they'll be killed in custody, it usually suggests one of two things: organized crime ties, or lots of dirt on extremely powerful friends that frequently visit your private island. Galant did not, to my knowledge, own a private island, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's most likely the first option.
What was the first option again?
Mob ties. Now, Galant was a man who trafficked in stolen goods, and it is not a stretch to imagine that he had ties to other people who trafficked in stolen goods professionally. But try as he might, Miller could not get Galant to roll. Honor among thieves and all that. Ultimately, without Galant's cooperation, the case ended there. Galant pled guilty to federal weapons charges and was sentenced to 8 years in prison, which he served in full. But during his arrest, Galant told Wayne Miller something that turned out to be entirely true. He said that he was a thief and he would always be a thief, and that when he got out of prison, he would go right back to stealing. And he wasn't lying. About 10 years later, Miller ran into Galant again, this time in a courthouse. Galant proudly reminded him of that conversation and explained that he was back in court once again facing burglary charges.
Well, once you pick a profession, it's hard to change careers mid-life. I mean, that causes problems.
And that's how one fire came inches from exposing a critical pillar of the IRA's weapons pipeline and then stopped. According to Miller, federal investigators believed Galant had been holding the weapons for Frank Salemi, also known as Cadillac Frank, a notorious Boston mob boss associated with the Patriarca crime family. Now, Salemi was of partial Irish ancestry and had known associations with James Whitey Bulger, an Irish-American gangster widely perceived to be sympathetic to the IRA.
You want to see my Whitey Bulger?
Later. Now, if that theory is correct, Galant's silence didn't just protect himself, it may have prevented a much larger network from being exposed. Which brings me to one final question. Why would anyone try to destroy military-grade firearms in a trash can fire? This has been The Weakest Link, the fire that nearly exposed the IRA, on Crime to Burn. I already am in trouble for messing up all the chords.
Why is that like it is? Why are you the way you are?
What's wrong? You looking for the kitten?
I'm looking for the noisemaker. Oh, jeez, it just teleports everywhere.
You can sleep like that if you stay still and quiet the whole episode and don't purr too loud. Oh, no, don't chew on the pop filter. Apparently the kids are more pliable.
A little more plastic in the mind.
I guess.
So I decided to never grow up.
Is that my problem? I tried to grow up. I didn't do a very good job at it. I don't feel like a grown-up, and when things get difficult, the first thing I think is, oh, I need an adult. And then panic sets in when I realize that I am the adult, and it's my problem to fix.
Oh, I don't have that thing where I ever think I need an adult for anything.
I have it every day.
I'm like Peter Pan. You're the adults are the pirates.
And that's why by the end of the day, when you say, what do you want for dinner? My answer is always to not make any more decisions.
That's okay. I will think for you.
Thank you. Can you tell me what I think about hard things?
You like to put them in wet places.
That's not what I meant, but...
Oh.
Nuzzling the dirt is fine. Almost doesn't matter, unless you're playing horseshoes or hand grenades. And
That's a game? Hand grenades?
Okay, well, there you go. Things April didn't know. Volume 1 of 500 plus. I just started drooling for no reason.
You were looking right into my eyes.
You're so talented.
I have all the stupidest tricks. And why make it not homogeneous across the thing to edit?
Homogeneity.
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 Let's not write a song right now. Let's do a podcast.
You can also help support the show by plastering our logo on your body by checking out the spread. You can also
spread out and plaster us on your body.
Wayne is the author of
How long did it take him to get that published?
I was the author of that. My adult beverage was the author
His
of that.
His marketing team was full of geniuses. I even spell that.
And the book that this week's story comes from, called Bang Boon. This is a lot of alliteration, man. I'm going to try that again. Wayne is the author of Burn, Boston, Burn, and the book that this week's story come from. God damn it.
Dang.
Wayne is the author of Burn, Boston, Burn, and the book that this week's story comes from.
Bad pacing.
Well, I can fix the pacing and edit and post.
Really? Those are my favorite months.
What months?
The coming months.
Oh, the coming months. No. I see what you did there. Isn't every month the coming month?
If we play our cards right. Walpole? Really?
Walpole. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I don't know how else you would not. Walpole.
Walpole?
No, there's no way.
That can't be right. It says rhymes with Walpole. 2 clean syllables, no surprises. Not Walpole, not Walpole, not whatever chaos Massachusetts usually inflicts on vowels. I think they should change it to Walpole. That's more fun to say.
Waffle?
Yeah, it sounds like waffle with a put in the middle.
And that's how the crow flew straight. into the devil's anus, or whatever they say. Where Google falls short, we step in. Suspend disbelief for cheese.
Apparently not as well as I used to.
This this poke bowl of apocalyptic nonsense.
That sounds delicious. I'd eat that.
I'd eat that. I'm not saying these people are ugly. It's like, it seems like it should be Magnus whatever, and it's just Jiv.
It's just Jiv. Magnus Decimus. Isn't the preferred method of getting rid of guns a boat accident?
Oh, that's an accident.
Right.
If you are in possession of stolen military weapons, do not attempt to destroy them using a trash can fire. Trash cans are not smelters. Garages are not blast furnaces. And rugs are not accelerants with a master's degree in metallurgy. If your plan to erase evidence involves, quote, small controlled fire, unquote, please know that you're not destroying evidence. You are creating a paper trail and inviting the ATF into your life. This has been a reminder that crime is hard, and some of you are not cut out for it. You're not about that life. Become an expert in being an expert at being an expert.
This episode brought to you by steel, which remains unmelted and deeply unimpressed. All right, now we need some sort of unhinged sign-off.
Blah, 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 blah.
That's unhinged, but I don't like it.
This has been Crime to Burn. We regret nothing.
Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
I'm Mandy.
And I'm Avery.
We're the hosts and creators of Thick Thighs and Creepy Vibes.
Join us as we take a deep dive into the macabre and the unexplained.
Listen every Wednesday as we take you on a chilling journey that transports you to all corners of the Great White North.
Let's boot those Sunday scaries while we take a rip into the harrowing tales of the haunted and the supernatural phenomena that defy explanation.
So grab your ketchup chips
And your Caesars and make sure to
creep it real.